Come on then, let's go. I think it's been very successful. You know, we had this mantra at PRCA of trying to be fewer, bigger, better. In other words, doing fewer things but making them larger and more significant. And I know from past experience that the bigger an event is, the more memorable it is, the more likely it is that people will put it in their calendars and come every year. We have two audiences that have a high degree of crossover, public relations and public affairs. So we felt that the opportunity was there for them to hear from each other's worlds, if that's the right way to put it, but also to network and meet one another. And so it made sense to combine the two together, and it's been a great success. You know, we've had more people than we would have had in the separate events. I've heard anecdotally from some of the delegates that they've been to sessions they otherwise wouldn't have been to. So from that respect, it's been a really positive experience. Yeah, absolutely. I think people want to hear, you know, we're in the creative industries, all of us here, and they want to hear from a wide range of voices from across the creative industries and also to network with those people. And so the opportunity to bring in a much broader range of people, both as speakers and delegates, was something we really wanted to do. It's been successful. You only have to look at the crowds of people that were sitting in some of the media-focused sessions to see how much interest there is in that space. It's something I hope we can do more of in the future. Yeah, I mean, I think the two that I would pick out that came across clearly were talent and technology. On the talent side, obviously we have some work to do to ensure that we've got the right pipeline of talent coming into the industry. We've got a lot more work to do on diversity, equality and inclusion, making sure that the opportunities are open to everyone, both in terms of people coming into the industry, but also those already in the industry. So that's a really key piece of work. Talent is a critical differentiator despite the rise of AI and non-human technology. It's still going to be important to get that right. So we heard from everybody that there's work to do there. Nevertheless, we've got great people in the industry. It's a very attractive place to work. So I think we can be confident that we'll get that right. On the technology side, obviously AI, artificial intelligence, both generative and cognitive AI is a big topic of conversation for everybody and has been today. The way in which our industry responds to that is going to be crucial to the future. We've heard some really positive stuff about the advances being made in terms of providing those tool sets to clients. We had, kicking off this morning, Simon talking about Burston's experience, the fact that they've built these AI tool sets that they can then offer to clients to help solve a load of their problems. That's very positive. Expect to see a lot more of that. But on the other side of that coin, there are some pitfalls that we have to navigate. We've had those highlighted today. I think PRCA has a role to play in making sure that we get through them unscathed. It's a perennial problem. I think, you know, showing how valuable PR is and communications is to the success of a business is something that's been around for a long time. I see it as a critical role for the PRCA. We want to be at the forefront of proving the value of the industry. And when I talk about the value of the industry, I don't mean the monetary value. I mean the real human value, and showing how having an effective communication strategy, having effective comms people can make a real tangible difference to your business. That's what excites the C-suite. They respond to results. You want to show the benefit of having that technology and that talent in-house around comms. Yeah, I mean, look, we're, like every industry, undergoing a period of immense change, and that's driven partly by socioeconomic circumstances, the 21st century, the century of crisis, but also by the technology changes that we just mentioned. You know, it will be critical to the future success of the industry how we respond to that. From what we can see in this room and the people we've heard to and the people we talk to as members, our members are responding incredibly positively to this period of immense change. They are not only expanding the range of tools that they use in their business, but also expanding the range of services that they offer. And I think it really is a case of making sure that you go with the clients, you go where they want you to go in terms of the service that you're offering. And we see, you know, incredibly positive signs that our industry is doing that. So change is exciting if you embrace it, and our industry is absolutely embracing it.
The culture was very important because they tend to generate a lot of polarizing media coverage, and the media coverage that we see do not always reflect how people feel and think towards organizations. So PR practitioners need to be aware of these culture wars. They need to be aware of the campaigns that can be polarizing, and they need to focus not only on media metrics but also on reputational metrics that tell us a lot more about not only what's going on in the traditional social media space, but also what exactly people are thinking and feeling towards organizations. So when you think about measuring something that essentially exists in people's minds, the option may seem endless. We have come up with a methodology and approach at Karma that brings what people think and feel, which is essentially what reputation is, right? It's not clients' content on own social media channels. Ultimately, reputation is what people think and feel. So we wanted to incorporate that in the methodology, as well as add additional layers of data analytics to really provide the actionable insights in understanding what exactly makes the reputation of these clients. So for this particular methodology, we wanted to look at 3 different data sources. The first one was traditional media. We wanted to be able to understand what exactly people saw in the coverage. Then we wanted to integrate social media data to be able to understand organically what happened on social networks, what people talked about, what they saw. And finally, we wanted to integrate audience opinion data to understand how these 2 data sets influence people's opinions. So to summarize what the methodology is 3 data sources, 6 different pillars. So the way that we've come up with these pillars is very simple. We try to identify all the different aspects that affect organizations' reputation, and we boil them down into 6 different pillars. And what this does is that all these pillars can be applicable for any given client, any given industry. And we've applied some statistical research, so we've surveyed people to understand what weight should we attribute for all of these pillars for any given industry, because the pillars don't have equal weight in people's minds, and we wanted to be able to reflect that. So that's how the pillars work. So to illustrate really how the score works, the reputation score works, we've conducted a first piece of research looking at the reputation of airlines, or looking at the aviation industry. Several things so we noticed various different interesting things in the data. The first one is that product and services came out as a very interesting, important pillar for all these airlines. And this finding really came out strongly in the traditional media, social media, and audience opinion research. The other thing is that not all crises were equal. During the period of analysis, we looked at very interesting case studies, looking at the Singapore Airlines flights that experienced a lot of disruption, unfortunately resulted in loss of life. We looked at the floods that happened in Dubai, severely affecting Emirates. These organizations were really quick with their handling of the media, really proactive with their communication, and the audience surveys reflected that proactivity. People felt really positive towards these brands. On the other hand, we had another airline, Cathay Pacific, which was plagued with flight disruptions, cancellations. Unfortunately, their proactivity with the media was not as strong, and that was again reflected in the audience opinion survey data. So that's how, using this methodology, PR teams can really demonstrate the importance of earned media in shaping people's perceptions. The first benefit is that it is a methodology that is tailored for PR and comms. We wanted to specifically look at the impact of editorial content on people's perceptions of organizations. The second thing is that we wanted to create a methodology that was unique and holistic. We wanted to track traditional media, social media, audience opinion surveys to really track that audience journey from what people see in the media, what people talk about on social media, and what people think. And finally, it is a methodology that was tested and endorsed by industry leaders. We formed an advisory group at Karma to ask our premium clients, how would this methodology work for you in practice? Should we add anything? And so far, the response that we got was overwhelmingly positive, with clients telling us it's not only a score that can be used for the PR teams, it can also be used for the wider business. Yeah, very good so far. I like the different stages. I think it's maybe the first time the PRCA does that. It gives a very dynamic feel with all the different stands outside. Yeah, very friendly atmosphere, professional but friendly, with lots of networking opportunities, lots of breaks. Yeah, really lovely so far.
When we launched the original one, it was 4 years ago. It was new into the industry, and we found that there was some engagement, but people were still pretty terrified and they claimed not to have enough information. So that was the first reason. And also, it's coincided with the change of government, and now the government has said they're going to look at making ethnicity pay gap reporting mandatory for pay gap reporting and disability. So it's perfect timing, really, because I think organisations are really going to have to get to grips with it. The ones that have ignored it for 4 years are going to have to now get to grips with it. So we want to be useful, want to be helpful. So we thought this is perfect timing. I would say, from the industry's perspective, I think there's a lot more information, but people are still fearful. They're fearful of the two areas that agencies and organisations are fearful of is, one, admitting there is a pay gap, because obviously that's not great, and then two, knowing how to close it, knowing what to do with it, which is why we produced the report. So essentially, people absolutely know it exists, but a lot of industry leaders are avoiding it because we're reputation managers, and it may not be great for the reputation. But what they're not realizing is it's worse if people are leaving, and they have ex-employees citing the reason why they've left an organisation is because of perceived pay gap. It's better if you come up and own what's happening in your organisation. Say, yes, we're at the beginning of our journey. Our pay gap is 15%. We think it's horrific. This is what we're doing to change it. That's always, owning your narrative is always much better. It's things like, this is stats from the Office of National Statistics. For every £1 a white family or a white person earns in the employment, and this is UK based, a UK black family earns 20p. And for every pound that the white family earns, a UK African or Bangladeshi family earns 10p. So what it is, it's debilitating economically, and that leads into things like being able to buy a home, being able to save, having a safety net. During COVID, that's why COVID affected lots of minoritized community more, because they couldn't go and separate. They had to all stay together. They had nowhere to go. So it has societal impact. And, as I mentioned in my talk, there's the morale, there's the culture of organisation. It drains. And I think also mentioned that it's not only minoritized groups that are, put off and thinking, well, I'm not going to stay in this organisation. If you and I worked together and you realised you were paid, £8,000 more than me for the same role, that has an impact on you. More psychologically, and it has an impact on me psychologically and economically. So it's generational wealth, and it's just not fair. It's not something that you should really espouse to have. If you can do something about it, you really should. It does need diversity, and diversity is available. But I always cite back to the reason why we formed REEB, because it's a choice. We're here talking about racial equity and inclusion because it's a choice to not look at who's paid what in your organisation and not make that fair. That's something that's easily available to organisations. So what it means is future, and I always say this, in the future, the talent pool that was available 5 years ago already today doesn't look the same. It isn't the same racial and ethnic makeup, which means you're absolutely cutting off your nose to spite your face, because all the talent will probably come from a more ethnically diverse background. And if you're not doing anything to court and attract that talent, not based on their ethnicity, just including them in the talent that you need, then eventually you'll get out of business. And people think that's, not possible. But absolutely, I mean, and I always cite it to remember COVID. Look at the big giants that went through COVID: Debenhams, House of Fraser. Who would have thought these giants, if retail would fall? Everybody's susceptible if you don't keep up. Well, it's not fair. It's my human right to be paid the same as my white counterpart, and I shouldn't be paid less because I have more melanin. Essentially, that's what we're reducing it to. But we always say it's anti-oppression, and I think, as I mentioned, we are about anti-racism. Is about anti-oppression. But if all the people doing the oppression, making the oppression, are white, then it looks like it's perceived as anti-white. But then you just have to look at, well, who made the mess and who's benefiting from all the structures. But we always, anyone in this space always makes a point of saying we don't actually care about whiteness, we just care about fairness and what's right. And if the people who had held the reins in terms of salaries were all Asian, then no one would call it anti-white, because it's really not about the race, it's about who has the power. So it's anti-oppression, and whoever is inflicting the oppression on any group, we're here to try and fight that and dismantle it. Well, from the REEB point of view, because there's two sides, there's my own personal practice and there's REEB. From REEB, we're producing this second guide, which will be free. We usually run an additional session for the first time we ran a session for HR professionals, so they really can get under the skin of what it is, and we'll probably do something today. So there's that practical guide. We're happy to talk people through. There's some action planning. There's some ideas. We did a small survey. There's some feedback. So we're here practically to talk you through the process. And then if you need to go deeper in terms of cultural change, what sort of activities, in our terms of reference, we've named about 8 goals. We had 8 or 9 goals, and that just give you a taste of the sorts of areas that you should focus on if you're trying to achieve racial equity and diversity and inclusion. And then beyond that, if you need a specialist like change communication or cultural, help with racial equity and culture, then you can talk to me personally on that. And that's something that I train and coach people in, because it does need coaching, and I do a lot of awareness on anti-racism, because a lot of people still don't know what that is. They just, as you said, they just think it's anti-white, and it really isn't. It's anti-oppression. I think it's really important because obviously we're part of PRCA. I think people who have supported us from 2020, it's important for them to see that we haven't just been, some people supported us financially. So I think it's really important to let them know that this is where the resources have gone in the past. And obviously that we have a very modest, but we're very grateful for the budget that we get from PRCA. So I think it's important that PRCA is viewed as a trade body that embraces all of the things, warts and all, things that are not great about the industry, things that are wonderful about the industry. I think we can't be a trade body and talk about fairness and talk about ethics especially, but not deal with something like race and racism. Well, I think from a candidate point of view, and I think this goes beyond race and ethnicity. I think within recruitment, every candidate now will not apply to a role unless the salary is included. That took a lot of hard work for recruiters to start including salaries. That was number one. Number two, lots of Gen X, if you like, will do Glassdoor, will talk to people, go on any sort of site to find some feedback about organisations. And if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, somebody, and this is what organisations have to remember, with social media, there used to be them and us in terms before social media. Now your employee is also a customer, is also your kind of informal social media manager, and they will go on and say, I work at a company I can't name, but this is what it's like. So you have to be really wary that all the information that used to just stay within the organisation now is out there into the world. So I think ultimately it means that the Gen X are not putting up with all of the conditions they had before. They want something else. And essentially, I say that talent pool, it's there, it's available, and I'm always going to come back to choice. If you as an organisation go to your recruiter and demand, I want a diverse talent pool, I can't have the same people over and over again. As you're paying the bill, you'll absolutely get it. That's whether you choose to do that. And even within the organisation, if you say to your recruiters and your HR people, we absolutely need different people because we're saying the same people, it will happen. So the choice and the power are with the leaders of organisations. Only that the ethnicity pay gap guide, the new guide, will be out in, I think, towards early October. It's free for members. We started free for members and probably beyond. Really do have a look at us. And then visit the REEB page and look at everything we're doing. And we're there to support members specifically in all their endeavours to make the workplace fairer and equitable for everybody.
So I think the PR industry has become far more focused on data and technology when it's looking forward to artificial intelligence and some of the benefits of that. It's moved away from being merely a face-to-face discipline. It's moved away from being just all about little black books of journalists and placing stories to being now a very broad stakeholder-based business that is everything from public relations to government relations to capital market communications, and it is encompassing all stakeholders and all forms of communication. But that, as I say, is now fueled by data and technology in a way that it never was before. I think it's vital that the industry as a whole is looking at how technology, new technologies are affecting communications, the new platforms we have, the new methods of communication. There will always be a niche for face-to-face, and in fact we will continue to do face-to-face, but much of communication is done through social media, through technology platforms, and I think it's absolutely vital. This is the future of the industry, and I think it's potentially an existential issue for the industry if we don't embrace new technology. Well, we still need people who can talk to journalists. We still need people who can go in and talk to government. We need people who can talk to investors. But we also need people who understand new platforms of communication, social media. We need people who understand the technology behind that. We need data engineers, data scientists. We need people who can essentially create stories, but the industry is very saturated and there's a lot of content out there. So we need creative specialists who can cut through with their creativity, and we need people who have brilliant ideas that can cut through as well. So it's a very broad gamut of people that we need to be joining the industry, and a very strong group of people to take the next step forward. I'm very optimistic about it. I think we're only going to become more and more fundamental. I think communications for organizations, for individuals, for society is incredibly important. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think we have a job to do to make sure that we are representing organizations in the right way. So yes, I think public relations is a broad skill now, highly valued, and will only become more valued. The industry has a really bright future. So we're part of WPP, and we are benefiting from the big investment the WPP is making into platforms, into new technologies, into artificial intelligence, and we are rolling that out across our business, across the 6,000 people in person globally. But also we are developing certain products and solutions and capabilities for clients, so things that we will actually work with clients, which will make their lives more efficient, will make their lives better, and I think will give them this notion that they can actually predict what is going to happen in communications. And we're not quite there, we're getting there, but I think that is really where things are going to get to. So you're going to be able to deliver messages to stakeholders with the right spokesman at the right time in the right way. And that is going to be technology driven rather than just something that we think is right. So I think we're moving from what is a thinking to what is something that we actually know, from thinking to knowing. I think a lot of life is about communication. It's about the right communication at the right moment. But also, you know, our business is focusing on reputation and how you build reputation, how you protect reputation. If you think about those basic skills and those basic building blocks, honestly, we can apply that to almost any industry, any situation. There are certain things that we're not going to do. You know, we're not fundraisers, we're not management, but we are certainly consultants on the future of communications. And I think we need to look at every stakeholder, and we need to be thinking about what are the services that they need and how can we help clients get to them. That's a very broad business these days, broadened by technology. And I think, you know, there will be players in each of those niches, and there will be players who will be full service versus full service. Well, I think this conference is extremely important for the industry. I think the PRCA has a huge role to play. As we look at communications in the future, the notion of keeping the industry disciplined, regulated, compliant, but together at the same time is massively important. So I really welcome this event. I welcome all events done by the PRCA. It's great to see James Hewes as a new CEO, and I think he's making some interesting moves. I'm a big believer that public relations and public affairs go hand in hand. So to bring these two conferences together is exactly the right thing to do, and it gives everybody that capability and ability to be able to move between the two. So I really welcome that too.
So it's called Lila Assistant, which is live, interactive language assistant. I think three things for me. I'm really big on ethics and privacy. And so I wanted to build something that I knew that I could trust for my business, but also for my clients. The second thing is around accessibility. I wanted something that I knew that I could use, but also people could use at any stage of their journey. So you didn't have to be a prompt engineer or an expert. I wanted to create something where there were ready-made templates and also pre-programmed chat assistants so that there's no barrier to entry. And I think that kind of ties in with the ethics part as well, making sure that you're building tech that is accessible and inclusive to all. And then the third thing was around quality. I knew when I was building Lila that I understand my industry. I write for a living. And I know the type of quality that I expect from the content and the output. And so I wanted to make sure that I had a tool that delivered on that. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different use cases for Lila. So like I mentioned, there's 80 templates, but then there's also pre-programmed chat assistants. So my two favorite ones are the journalist chat assistant and the PR consultant. I do a range of things from brainstorming creative ideas, and I think that's a really good starting point for anyone. You have an idea about something, a campaign or whatever, and you just want maybe 5, 10 additional ideas. So that's a really great way to use something like Lila or any sort of generative AI to help you brainstorm ideas. I also use it sometimes if I am working on a campaign and I'm thinking about different feature angles around a story. So for example, a feature angle that I would pitch to the likes of Elle would be very different to the type of feature angle that I would pitch to the likes of Campaign. And so I use Lila in particular to help me really sort of iron out and think about different sort of feature ideas. And then obviously there's the human element that comes into it. So Lila's always a starting point for me, but then at the end of the day, I'm the expert. So I kind of build on the output that I get. I think it will change the roles that we do and some of the things that we do. And a really good use case is that I went to a tech conference and I met someone from ITV who said that he'd brought AI into his team, and so he'd had to retrain his entire team because a lot of his team had been doing design work. And obviously AI has advanced so much that basically that design work could be delegated to an AI. And so he started upskilling his team to get them to think more about strategic stuff. And so I think that's kind of the same for us. It depends on your use case. I think if you are a freelancer, a consultant, maybe an in-house team, then AI will kind of come in and do those sort of mundane tasks that normally would take you hours, and actually then you can find an AI to help you. I think agency side, it might change the structure in terms of how people structure their agencies and what they focused on. So you might find specific teams doing specific tasks. I think overall for the industry, I think what we will find is that AI will just change the way that we work, and for the better. I mean, I think it's massively important. I see conferences like this as a way to, one, we're in a sort of industry of relationships. I think it's really important for us to be able to meet our peers. I also think it's really important for us to exchange our ideas and experiences. And I think, you know, there's nothing better than, say, for example, myself as a founder, kind of hearing from another founder about, you know, their challenges, their solutions, etc. So I think it's really important for us to do this as an industry as a whole.
It is everything. It is the lifeblood of an organisation. It is about the way that people think and feel about their work. Fundamentally, it's about how good they can be at their jobs. It's about them turning up every day and delivering. It's everything. So I joined a couple of years ago when there was a real staffing crisis. Things have improved, thankfully, in terms of the number of prison officers, and effective internal communications has been a real part of that. If you think that prisons rely on enough prison officers being in their jobs and turning up and working in the wings, without that, they can't. Prisoners can't do anything in their day, and effectively that means that the justice system doesn't work. Prisons function by rehabilitating people and then releasing people back into society, and therefore we have a sort of functioning justice system. I was brought in because we were losing a lot of staff, and it was really to tackle those key drivers of attrition and come up with an effective strategic internal comms approach to fix that. So this was different to any other previous role I'd done because it was super strategic. It was all about retention. We had such a clear goal, and many of the other roles I've done in different organisations have been, much more tactical, and that's across the private and the public sector. So this opportunity to use true strategic internal comms was a real privilege. Now, when you look at what that means in practice, so prisons are very complex and closed spaces. So it's actually illegal to take a mobile phone into a prison. There is no tech. Prison officers do not have mobile phones on them. So in terms of frontline engagement, just think about how difficult it is to reach that audience. And actually it's really lovely because it comes back to that people, the foundation of communication being people, and a lot of it is about face-to-face engagement. It's about coaching leaders, improving communication skills of leaders, to get out there, get in front of people and make people feel valued. Yeah, so making sure that people felt valued was the absolute foundation stone of everything that we do. You know, being a prison officer it's not a normal job. it's not an everyday, it is an absolutely extraordinary job. And a lot of the prison officers that I meet, they build their lives around it. They feel such a privilege to be in that position, but it is hard. It's very, very difficult. And fundamentally, if we can make prison officers feel more valued, then they will stay in their jobs, and therefore the justice system functions. So I kind of view journalism as also part of the communications industry, because, you know, journalism is about getting the message out, and that's what consumers want to read. And, you know, I'm a fundamental believer in journalism as a force for democracy and as a force for good. But I think that also implies sort of on the other side of the coin, the sort of the PR side, the dark side, as I used to call it when I was a journalist. I swore I'd never go there. I think that all communications, but especially internal communications, is about people. It's about understanding people. It's about understanding the impact that people have on an organisation. And if any organisation, public or private, can understand that it's people that keep the whole world running, then they will be more successful. And I believe that the communications industry is at the heart of that. In communications, you end up with these disciplines. I've been a content specialist, I've been a media relations specialist, I've been a journalist, and now I'm an internal comms specialist. And, you know, I think if you're going to wrap it all up into the power of comms, yes, it has to be about the public, it has to be about the personal. You've got to wrap it all together and come back to the person. You know, for me, it's a real challenge finding meaningful work in my industry, because the fact is that a lot of the jobs are based in London, and that for me is a real challenge. I think coming together with like-minded professionals who are passionate about what they do, it's really rejuvenating, and I know it will give me energy to go into the next weeks, months, years.
So the really exciting thing about podcasts is that they are the stickiest media type by far and away at the moment. You know, it's not uncommon for news publishers to see maybe 30-second dwell time on their articles, whereas on a podcast, people are spending maybe 15 or 20 minutes at a time engaging with a brand. So for me, I think that's one of the most exciting opportunities for PR at the moment, because, you know, that's a dedicated period of time that somebody is spending with your message. I spoke to a number of PR professionals before attending the PRCA conference, and they told me a few interesting things about the pain points that they experience when it comes to podcasts. One of the big ones is reporting return on investment, and there are a number of useful tools that you can use to help do that. There's listening agencies that will, you know, clip kind of from podcasts to hear when you've been spoken about. But one of the best ways to get your ROI is to simply ask the podcast that you've been working with to provide some of that for you. And the three metrics that I would argue are the best to use are downloads, listens, and importantly, that listen through rate, which tells you how long somebody's been spending with your message. But I would argue that it's a far more strategic approach to target podcasts that speak to your specific niche. There are very good podcasts with highly engaged audiences on pretty much any topic that you can imagine. So if you drill down a little bit and find those podcasts that are speaking to your niche, you're far more likely to be speaking to the right people, which, for my money, is better than speaking necessarily to the most people. A lot of clients express an interest, I think, in wanting to start their own podcast, and I would argue that that is only something to be undertaken if you're extremely serious about it and you've got a really clear strategic intention, purpose for it, and you know how you're going to market it. One of the pitfalls one of the traps that a lot of people fall into is they will produce a podcast, but then they won't know how to get it out to people. And so my advice would be to work with an agency who are not only used to producing podcasts of your type, so perhaps kind of branded podcasts, but also who understand how to market podcasts and get them out to the right people. There are three main ways to get involved with podcasts using paid media. One, you can buy ads on a podcast network, something like Acast or Spotify, and that's where you supply your own creative, and that gets distributed across a whole network of shows. The second is podcast sponsorships, where you work closely with a podcaster, and they will do a host read, and you'll be familiar with those from the podcasts that you hear on your own feed. And the third, and probably most interesting for me, way of doing it is to work with a podcast partner and to create some branded content or some advertorial that sits within their own feed. We do this at the New Statesman, and we have great success linking up brand partners and public affairs people with our audience, providing a win-win, because it works for the client and it really works for the audience if they're crafting a message that audience are interested in. For me, coming to a conference like the PRCA conference as a journalist has been a really important opportunity to meet people who live on the other side of the fence in PR and in public affairs, not least because those are people who, we work with daily. PR people, public affairs people, they have access to the stories and the talent that we want to be reporting on. So for me, being here has been a really valuable experience, and I think bringing conferences like this together is really important.